Hello and welcome to Earth Day Eve with the Canada Green Space Protection Coalition and our second virtual town hall. And tonight we're talking about stormwater management in Canada North. And I know my candle is flickering and the sky is still lit, but I expect before our evening is over that may change. With your permission, I'm going to put my candle down and continue on with the events of the evening. I have the pleasure of presenting to you our panel for this evening. Doug Nuttall is the KGPC's expert on water engineering and particularly stormwater engineering. We also have with us from the Canada Green Space Protection Coalition board, Karen Noseworthy, our secretary, who is going to moderate our question period, and Neil Thompson, who is going to work in the background and make all things technical work. Neil, can you advance my slide?
All right, so I'm going to share the screen for you, and
thank you. And here is our opening slide. And I think it's particularly fitting that we're here together tonight on the eve of Earth Day. And we couldn't find a better slide about Earth Day than this one. And I feel obligated to read it. Our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect for all human beings and all other living creatures. I don't take recognition for that. It's a quote from Gaylord Nelson, but I think the human aspect of environmental management matters a great deal. And I know from listening to you, our supporters, that's very much central to the issue behind our objection to the development of the Canada golf course land, that truly it is a part of our environment. It contributes to most definitely our clean air, and we know our water and manages our storm water and clearly is our beauty. It's also this environment of decency that we very much want to protect. So welcome to the evening tonight. And our next slide, Neil. Again, tonight, your host for the evening. It's my pleasure. I'm going to cover off a few updates for you tonight and what we're doing going forward at the KGPC. But our special guest is Doug Nuttall. And Doug's going to give you an overview of stormwater management in Canada North, a perspective he has great knowledge of based on his own professional history. We'll do a bit of an overview and the impact of green space development on stormwater management. He's going to help us understand what a sub-watershed plan is and issues in the Kizell Drain. And the Kizell Drain is where we exist, in the Kizell watershed. I already introduced Karen, and she's going to moderate our questions and Doug's answers. And as I said, if anything goes wrong, we email Neil Thompson as president of the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association and a member of our board. But Neil is a mastermind at the technical, and without him, we couldn't pull this off. Remember, throughout the evening, we are happy to take questions. We've had questions come in advance, and we have those ready to pose to Doug, but he's willing to take many more. So all you have to do through the evening is email townhall@ourcanadaGreenSpace.ca, and we'll field those questions for you with Karen's help. Thanks, Neil. Next slide. So I'll go over a quick update right now, primarily where we are with the Ontario Land Tribunal since our first virtual town hall at the end of February, an update on Queen's Park, And then an update on what I know you all write about and are curious about and are concerned about is how we're doing financially and do we have enough money to continue. So I'll top off with that. And then we'll move quickly on to Doug's presentation. Thanks, Neil. So the Ontario Land Tribunal, the decision was issued on March 22nd, and I think it's fair to say it's not the decision we wanted. It's certainly not the decision that our expert team wanted, nor our community. And we know it's not the decision the city wanted as well. And I would suggest, and it's not the explanation we deserved. One of the challenges with this decision was the lack of content in the reasoning behind the two-member panel that made the decision. And that caused a lot of consternation to the coalition. It caused some serious consternation to our experts as well. And while we had some concerns, we rationalized, what do we do to make that right? The realization was that the costs for this exercise were very large, beyond our expectations, and actually came very close to $250,000 on the OLT by itself. And I remind you that that involved a lot of preparation by our experts over the many months preceding it, tables of discussion that are mandatory within the process of the OLT, back and forth about motions of objection that both the city and the KGPC raised about the readiness of this application for the OLT, and other matters as well. Having said that, we rationalized with the city that we weren't in a position to ask for a review of this. A review, there are two forms of review for the OLT. One would have been to go back to the OLT itself and ask for a master review or a review by a senior member. At that point, that member could ask for whatever they want as part of a solution, which could include going through the entire process over again. The alternative would be to go to the divisional courts and ask the divisional court for a legal review of the file. Either case was going to cause us to invest many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of $1,000s more in this planning review. And in our back pocket has always been the argument that the legal options here are much more attractive. And the general view is that these legal options will hold better for the community protection. And so the decision was made to not pursue a review of this decision. What we're left with, the outcome of that decision, we have 192 or so conditions of draft plan approval, which remain unsolved. So the OLT approved the subdivision, the draft plan of subdivision, conditional upon these 192 or so conditions being met. That is all in front of the city, ClubLink, and to a certain degree, the Canada Green Space Protection Coalition as a party at the OLT were in decision to go back there. But primarily, there is a great deal of discussion yet to be had. In some of the matters, they involved organizations extraneous to the OLT. That includes organizations like the National Capital Commission, the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority, to name two important bodies who have the ability by law to opine and restrict development in the watershed. So MVCA as overseer of the Drainage Act, and the National Capital Commission as a downstream landowner. I'm going to leave that for now and let Doug explain that to you later on. But the important thing to know about the OLT and the process for us was an ability to get our experts, one of which is Doug Nuttall, fully up to speed, fully engaged on our situation and the issues here. And their ability to think through all the aspects of this, analyze it, go through the data, and come up with their opinions, which they did for the OLT. And in our case, in the matter specifically of Doug, will transition very well in our legal pursuit of ClubLink, the launch of our applications, the restrictive covenants. And you will see down the road that on the matter of the restrictive covenant on stormwater regrading, Doug will be a star witness for the coalition. Next slide. Neil, thank you. The City of Ottawa, things are going very well with the City of Ottawa. They have become true partners of the coalition, and we're very proud of that relationship. A good part of that relationship we credit to our new Ward 4 councillor, Kathy Curry. And I have to give her a shout out because I believe her schedule tonight has allowed her to join us, and I think she's out there with us tonight. So as always, Kathy, I am incredibly grateful to you, your team, and the energy you put in to working with us. We work collaboratively. We are in touch constantly. And we are equally as committed to protecting our community. In the last 6 months, the mayor has written not one, but two letters of support, and each one gets stronger. So I can only imagine how he's going to finish out his term by November on the matter of Canada North Green Space. And we're very grateful for his support and the support of his Chief of Staff, Serge Arpin, and their entire office. And we continue to be encouraged. Councillor Curry, her emails and her newsletters are full of detail, and it's helpful to the coalition because as volunteers, we don't have to stop and rewrite all of this material when it's out there full and complete in one form. And so we're always nodding thanks to our councillor. The City of Ottawa has also undertaken a great challenge on behalf of the community, and I think we want to acknowledge that now. And I'm not sure that's always been made clear. And as this fight, because if I call it less than a fight, I would be remiss. As this goes on, I think we have to appreciate that the costs go on too. And I understand through Councillor Curry that the city is well on its way now to have spending upwards of $1 million on this fight, which matches what the coalition has spent. Not quite $1 million, but for a small organization, we're closing in on $500,000. So we really appreciate this contribution. And we understand that a big slice of that is going to be this exercise with the Supreme Court of Canada in defense of the Ontario Court of Appeal decision. So again, thank you, Mayor Watson. Thank you to the council and to Councillor Curry for her leadership on this. But we also know there's a reason why the city must do this. And we've already seen the heads turn on what we can call a Me Too developer movement. And I'll just say the Me Too developer movement meets Cedar Hill Golf Club. And as I alluded to in a recent e-news, we understand from Cedar Hill homeowners that their 1980s subdivision agreement with the city of Nepean is now being tested by a developer against the City of Ottawa, citing the perpetuities clause. So here we go, the exact situation that the city worried about and why the city is right in challenging this to the highest court in the land. Municipalities, levels of government that are committing to large long-term contracts, developments, infrastructure can hardly enter into those if their partners are going to put their hand up in 10 years and say, I've got a better offer, I want to move this land and do something else with it. It doesn't make sense for community. It doesn't make sense from a management perspective. So we're all about saying thank you to the city for having the temerity to chase this to the Supreme Court, and we're behind you all the way. Thanks, Neil. I think my last slide is about Queen's Park, and we started last week a letter writing campaign. Our MPP, Marilee Fullerton, has been a big supporter of the coalition from the get-go. She's worked well with MP Jenna Sudds, who is equally a great supporter of the work we do. And we're just concerned that recent messaging has alerted people that somehow the province is no longer responsible for this problem, that it all belongs to the city, and there's 192 conditional clauses that the city can rest upon to stop this development. As a community, we're very concerned about that. Why does Canada deserve less protection than Oakville? We all know and remember last year that for some great reason, not understood well to the masses, Glen Abbey was protected by this current government from development by ClubLink. It's an election year in Ontario. Every 4 years, you get a chance to speak. And we feel that letter writing at this time of the year is the best thing we could do. We believe that Marilee Fullerton can deliver this message to Queen's Park, and we're asking you to support her to deliver that message by joining our letter writing campaign. Check out our website, ourcanadagreenspace.ca, and all the information is there. If you haven't written your letter yet, we've had many hundreds cross our desk in the last few days, and we want to make sure Marilee has all the tools she needs to get a fair decision for Canada on this matter. Thanks, Neil. My last update is on KGPC financial news, and it's great news. We reminded you in February that we had a new fundraising goal of $250,000. It was a large amount, part of it due to deal with the overruns I spoke about for the OLT, but part of it to get ready for our upcoming legal fight. It's incredible. The community has responded with $162,000 since February for this fight, and we are so ever grateful for you. And you need to hear it from me and know in your heart, we cannot do this without you. So please listen tonight, get more information, and I hope you'll believe that the balance that we need, another $88,000, is worth your contribution. So please put that in the back of your mind. And Neil, let's move on to a great slide for me. I think it's an opportunity to remind everybody, my favorite rock slide, and I like to tell people, no, we didn't create this. One of our board members was out for a walk in our green space and found this rock in this place and sitting there, created by, I can only hope, 2 loving members and young members of our green space who have hope for the future. So tonight of all nights, on the eve of Earth Day, we ask you to think about your memories you have about living in Canada North and why you probably chose to live here. Protect your tomorrows. And we're asking for a donation of $1,000 if that's something you can do. And if it's not, we're happy to accept whatever donation you can provide. And we'll give you more of that at the end of the slide. But I want to open it up with, if Neil will advance the slide, to just a reminder of what we use your money for. This is our year-end slide from December 31st, 2021, and 84% of all the funds donated went directly to expert professional services so that we can hire the kind of competency that Doug Nuttall offers, and Dennis Jacobs offers, and Steve Quigley offers, and of course our legal teams, all 3 of them. Our event expenses, we work aggressively to manage, and administration is basically our insurance costs and small costs associated with accounting, etc. So I want you to know that it is on the premise of volunteerism that all your money is contributed towards this fight to save our community. Thanks, Neil. A favorite little corner of mine on the green space. Doug, you'll appreciate that. There's a little marsh hidden on the left and another little marsh hidden on the right. And somewhere in there are some birds and an otter and an egret, and it's heaven on earth for many of us in Canada. Thanks, Neil. And so one of my favorite slides, one of my favorite pictures, and also somebody who has become a real pleasure for me to work with. I've learned so much from Doug Nuttall. Doug, thank you so much for doing this with us tonight.
You're very welcome.
Tell us a little bit, tell the audience a little bit about your background and your professional history, will you?
Sure. So my name is Douglas Nuttall. I'm a water resources engineer. I've been working in the Canada area. I joined Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority as their water resources engineer in 2005, and I was there till 2014. I was involved with every combination of study and report that was involving riverine systems throughout the watershed. So that included, Carp River Restoration Project, the Shirley's Brook, Shirley's Brook, Watts Creek, subwatershed studies, the work being done on floodplain mapping through the whole area over that time period. After Mississippi Valley, I joined Paris Geomorphic, where we did fluvial geomorphology throughout Eastern Ontario. And since then, I worked for JP2G and now HDR. At HDR, I've got a team of water resources engineers who are doing mostly transportation-related work right now. But it's one of the specific reasons I came to HDR was because of their experience and expertise in regenerative design. So you've heard of sustainability. Well, that when you're actually trying to implement sustainability, just making things the same as they were, just keeping things the way they are, that's not really good enough. We have to regenerate so that we're allowing coevolution of the ecosystem and society at the same time. So, yeah, what interests you about stormwater management in particular? Well, my family's idea of a good time is to go canoeing for like 30 days at a time. And when I was in the university, I remember a lab, we were doing hydrology and hydraulics. And we had these wave machines, and we were looking at, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is great. You're looking at supercritical and subcritical flow. You're looking at how the Froude number is changing. You must go, this must be so much fun for you to go out whitewater canoeing and see all this. And he was looking at me with a completely blank stare. He had no idea what I was talking about. And it's one of the jokes I make here at work is that, anything that can be engineered, but water always flows downhill. And there's no real way around that. The water is both the first and the last thing that gets involved in all forms of civil engineering. That you can't design a subdivision, you can't run a highway, you can't make a pipeline, you can't do any of those things unless you think about what the water's doing. And you think about it originally, and you think, okay, how am I going to solve the problems I'm going to run into? And you think about that, and then you do all the rest of the design work, and then at the end, you check, did I actually do that? And that's yeah. Sometimes that works, and some people forget that, and you run into problems.
I so appreciate that. My background as a pharmacist and the science of it, but the application of the science, uh, that's not the win. The win is the take up of the understanding of the application and how that improves things for people. I think it's not dissimilar. It's that interface that's so important.
And it's we've probably all heard of nature deficit disorder, where people get as much benefit out of being in a green space as getting the best psychological treatment that they can get. It's as healthy to be outside as it is doing absolutely anything else. In fact, healthier than most. And my job, I get to go stomp in creeks. It's fantastic.
This is a great job. So beyond canoeing and stomping in creeks, I know you have a lovely family, and I know you live in God's country, not too far from Canada. What? And I know you build skating rinks in the winter for your kids. I know that. What are your interests? Just and then we'll let you expound on your expertise.
Well, as I said, I'll touch on my family does canoeing, but I would say my hobby, if we call it that, is that I've been studying sustainability engineering since 1996. It's kind of a passion of mine. What are the units of sustainability? How do you maximize social benefit while minimizing negative ecological impacts? And most of my work since 1996 has been trying to find that happy balance between the two. And so, yeah, I've spent thousands of hours trying to figure out some of the more complicated parts of the wicked problem of sustainability. And there's answers. And I won't dwell too much on that here just because there's a lot of other material to cover. But if somebody's curious, I'm happy to fill them in on, I can give you the 3-hour elevator speech if you like. Anyhow, yeah. We'll skip that for now.
But folks, there is a town hall. So in your town hall, you can actually tell us if you're interested in hearing about that from Doug, and we'll make arrangements for that, because there is something important about residents and understanding what the problem is to the degree that we can. And I think that's why we're so appreciative of Doug agreeing to come on tonight, as we did with Alyssa Tompkins in our first town hall on the legal matters. We recognize there's a complexity that we may not have the training to understand, but we can certainly try and understand the important aspects of it. And we're very grateful, Doug, for you coming tonight, and not for bringing your canoe, because I don't know how we'd manage the slideshow with it. But Neil, I'm going to ask you to advance away from one of my favorite pictures, and I'm going to turn the screen over. I'm going to block out here, folks, and leave you in Doug's hands for the next little bit. And remember, during Doug's presentation, send your questions to Town Hall. We'll collect them, and then Karen will take care of them at the end. Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome. So I'm here to talk to you about water and where it's going. What's your watershed happening? How do we do stormwater management in Canada North? So we're looking really at 3 specific areas. The Beaver Pond catchment area, where the golf course is, and most of the houses in the area. The Kissel Drain catchment area, which is everything downstream before it reaches the Watts Creek. And then the Shirley's Brook diversion. This has been talked about for 25 years, and part of the work being done at KNL is to try to see what portion of Shirley's Brook can be diverted, because they generally have a problem. There isn't enough capacity in Shirley's Brook to have any significant increase in flows caused by urbanization. And so they've asked if they can dump the extra water into the Kissel Drain, and that has its own problems. This land is managed by 2 different groups. The City of Ottawa is all the area in white, and the NCC is in that blue, green, turquoise color. The NCC holds a lot of this land as green space. Some of it is like, your high-tech campus there in the Nortel campus. Some of it is military base, the Connaught Range. It's generally managed. That area is managed by the NCC. The rest of it is private ownership and under authority of the City of Ottawa. That whole area, everything draining to the Ottawa River from Watts Creek and everything north and west of that is all part of the Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority's authority. That's their watershed. To the south of Watts Creek, the immediately south of that drains into the Carp River, and south of that it ends up flowing down into Rideau Valley. Next slide, please. So I touched there on it. Anytime that we convert green space into some kind of urbanization, we run a pretty serious risk of dramatically changing the flows downstream. Normally it wouldn't be a problem if we didn't actually use the riverine systems downstream of urbanization. Because we end up relying on them, we kind of we're dependent on making them, on making sure we're not damaging them as we're using them. And urbanization, one of the things that we do, because we've got curbs and gutters and sewers and so forth, is we shorten the time it takes water to get from the ground to the river. So we shorten the flow path for resorption. That's not right. That's not the right word. I don't know what I was trying to say there. But we also increase imperviousness so that much more of the water actually runs off because of urbanization. And the combination of those two, we can increase post-development flow rates by like 10 times by doing this. There's a creek in Toronto that when it's currently evolving. That's a polite way to say it's been blown up by urbanization. When it's done, it'll have a floodplain that's 400 meters wide. The challenge is the houses were built 100 meters apart. They built for a little valley, and the little valley isn't going to stay like a little valley, and there's nothing they can do to stop it at this point, because they didn't try very hard to avoid downstream impacts. When we do stormwater management, we're intending to buffer that peak flow so that the post-development peak flow isn't worse than the pre-development peak flow. Even when we do that, that's not really good enough. That still very much changes the character and quality of the river, the receiving stream. If that's all we do, we're not doing enough. Unfortunately, that's all we're required to do by law because the laws are slow to catch up. We only tend to protect the things we are losing. We're not very good at being proactive. They'll say you can't, hurt your black rat snakes after you've exterminated all your black rat snakes. I mean, that's a long diatribe. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So, yeah, one of the ways we try to make things less bad is to have a subwatershed plan where we're looking at all the pieces that go into this. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got human uses, ecological uses, hydrology, hydraulics, groundwater interferences, and influences. There's a lot of moving parts. It takes time to develop a subwatershed plan. The Shirley's Brook and Watts Creek subwatershed study was started by Dillon in 1999. Well, it was produced by Dillon in 1999. And the hydraulics and hydrology was updated by AECOM in 2015. This is when you hear the talk about the AECOM report. This is the one that matters. It took them 5 years to build that. I was a part of all but the very end of it, and there was a lot to it. They spent a lot of effort and to calibrate, to make a really, I would argue, sophisticated calibrated model. They actually made 3 separate models: one for the land upstream of the beaver pond, one for the beaver pond, and one for the channel downstream of the beaver pond. That hydrology and hydraulics was further updated by MVCA, the Conservation Authority, in 2017. Well, technically, it started in 2014 and it was finally approved in 2019 as a single model. It's still in the process of getting included in the zoning bylaw. It's not actually fully implemented. In part, cities are slow, and in part, the COVID, yeah. And as part of this particular development proposal, the city asked the developer to update the model to make it one continuous model that incorporated all the changes that were that were in the process since 2017. There's multiple consultants and consultations that occur at every stage. It's supervised by generally, not all subwatershed plans are supervised in this way, but in this case, the Shirleys-Brook-Watts Creek one was supervised by a technical advisory committee that advising the council, so that when it came time for council to approve the subwatershed plan, they were reasonably educated on what it would cover. And every one of these studies requires approvals. Some of them require approvals through the conservation authorities, through the Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Natural Resources, from the city. There's lots of players in the field. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. And to repeat what Barbara said, if anybody has any questions, you can flag it either by email or in the chat, or get it to me, and I don't mind taking some time and answering your questions. For one of the, in conjunction with the timeline I was just talking about, we should probably fill in on the timeline that we were actually seeing on what's going on here. What are all the steps that have been involved? So KNL, which is on the other side of the beaver pond, the north side, was approved in 2006, and it was approved in its entirety, with the understanding that they would proceed in phases as they figured out each of their, all the problems that they had, how they would work around them. And some of the problems are actually kind of complicated, like to the point of ridiculous, that there's like 13 years later, they're still working on the same problems, that it's hard to do. They have problems. The current regulation, Conservation Authority's current regulation, came into being in 2006, and at that point, they had authority, they gained authority, or responsibility, maybe the better word, over provincially significant wetlands. At the time, the beaver pond was not considered a provincially significant wetland. PSW gets a score, or all wetlands get a score. In order to be considered a PSW, it has to have a score of 600 or higher. It had a score of 599. The outlet structure got approval in 2008, although it was built a lot before that. They just, as part of the KNL stuff, they got around to saying, well, let's get this structure actually in somebody's books, and they relied on the 1990 design. It was built soon after that. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, in 2010, the city started development of the sub-watershed model. One of the things they recognized is that nobody knew enough about how this system worked. It's easy to say, well, we're just going to discharge our water into this stream as long as we don't discharge more water into the stream than we discharged before, at a rate we didn't discharge before, then it'll work. The problem is the provincially significant the wetland at the time acts as a great big buffer in the system, and it changes how the system responds, and it's more about total volume of water, not flow rate, that governs. And it matters. And so they started developing the sub-watershed model, and they found it was really complicated. There's a lot of weird things going on. The wetland was reevaluated in 2011 because of the presence of Blanding's turtles. One of the things you get scored is if you've got endangered species, you gain 200 points. Even when they looked at it when they reevaluated it, they said, well, probably should have been evaluated higher than that 600. It probably should have always been considered a provincially significant wetland. There was a Santec engineering report started in 2014 for the it was as a drainage engineering report. They were looking at how do we extend the Kizil drain right up to the beaver pond, so that all of the riverine system was under the direct authority of the municipality. The Drainage Act allows, it's an old piece of legislation, and it allows a municipality to treat a river or a creek as a sewer. It has the same legal standing, so that they can go in and clean out a sewer. Well, they can go in and clean out a river that's under the Drainage Act. For the portions that aren't under the Drainage Act, the Kizil Creek, as it were, rather than the Kizil Drain, they have to get the permission of all the people. Like, everybody would have to give permission to do any work on their private land, and it's a lot simpler to do it through the Drainage Act. There's challenges there too, but yeah. And then AECOM, that was in 2010, the city started the development of the model. AECOM Phase 2 report, that was the end of that process, was published in 2015. It found that there was a very large quantity of storage being used in the beaver pond that isn't observed on the surface. And we can measure how much water leaves the beaver pond. We can see the pipe out, we can gauge it, we can gauge the stream downstream from it, and we can say, hey, this much water is flowing out. And the total amount of water flowing out of the beaver pond is significantly larger than the total amount of water that was ever in the beaver pond. So they can put a float on the pond, and they can say, well, at this elevation, it's at this elevation at this time, and they can add up, well, how much volume had to have left? Well, this much had to have left, but that volume was never there. It was somewhere else. And for the very large storms, it's something like 70,000 cubic meters of storage, which is a really big number. It's about a third of the total volume of the beaver pond when it's completely full. So it's missing storage. We know it exists because the water ended up going downstream. We just don't know where it is. It's assumed that it's stored subsurface, that it's in the blast rock that's surrounding everybody's homes. that when they came in with the granite's a bad place to put basements, so they shatter the basements with hoe rams and explosives and so forth, and they dig out the rock. But there's space created when you break rock apart, and that space can fill up with water, and it drains away slowly. The beaver pond drains out over about 20 days. It's not a quick thing, and some of that slowness might be coming from all this storage being potentially in the voids between the rocks. So can we go to the next slide, please? Right, and so the Stantec engineers came back with their engineering report in 2016 and said that there isn't sufficient outlet for the flows that the Kizzel Drain is currently receiving, and it's there's no way to make this Kizzel Creek a municipal drain until we've got that resolved. There has to be some way to resolve this drainage problem prior to doing really anything else. And so I'm going to skip a step there. So early servicing on KNL Phase 9 was approved in 2019, and there was that Drainage Act process was begun. Just before that, like a month before that, the city provided direction at a pre-consultation on the Canada Golf Course project in 2019, and saying, look, you got to wait until we hear back on all this Drainage Act stuff. Take your time. We're not in any hurry here. In 2020, the developer, at the time it's ClubLink, appealed the fact that the city didn't make a decision and sent the Canada Green Golf Course project to the Ontario Lands Tribunal. And in January 2022, just before the first hearing, the ClubLink's consultants met with all the various stakeholders. All that consultation that was happening for years and years and years on all the previous phases, they've just begun that process now. Next slide, please. Yeah, maybe should have started on this earlier, but the reason that the Kizzel Drain doesn't have capacity, it's two specific things. There's erosion, which demonstrates that the channel is receiving flows that it's not capable of managing, of carrying safely. We're getting excessive erosion, which is going to cause excessive, channel migration, widening, scouring. There's a bunch of different things that can happen here. The other challenge is there's flooding issues. There are numerous structures and properties downstream, 6 properties and 6 culverts or bridges that currently have flood risk. So they don't have the capacity to safely pass the water that it's currently getting, and therefore the city can't really approve any development that would knowingly increase flood risk unless they're prepared to accept the liability that goes with it. They're not. Cities are inherently risk adverse, and this is something they really would not want to address. They've known these deficiencies exist since, well, for at least 5 years now, and they cost money to fix, and they take time to fix. There's approval processes on all these things, and they're not there yet. Next slide, please. Yeah, further issues. So this is, as you're saying, the Drainage Act can be used by the city to essentially take responsibility for the water course coming from the Beaver Pond down to where it joins into the existing Kizzel Drain. they might also have to take responsibility downstream from there, because if they're changing the flows upstream, they're going to be ending up changing the flows downstream. And so they might end up having to have the Kizil drain extend downstream all the way to the Ottawa River. That's not something they're going to want to do, because that automatically involves the NCC, and they may have a completely different set of priorities. That change in flow, even though the Drainage Act would kick in, downstream landowners can refuse to accept any change in flows by seeking an injunction. It's one of the rules under common law is that the water is free to go where it's always gone. This only counts when it's a defined water course, but this is a defined water course. And it's any downstream landowner can refuse to accept a change in flows. Now it's convenient that the NCC is at the bottom end, because any change in flows upstream they could speak to, but actually anybody who owns has littoral rights, it's called. The littoral zone is that portion of the riverbanks that gets flooded. So if you've got littoral rights, if you've got access to the river, you actually have the legal authority to challenge a change in upstream flows. Most people don't do this because developers have deep pockets. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right, okay, so yeah, now we're into the questions and answers. Now I've got a bunch of questions here that people have already sent in, and I'm happy to go through these.
Karen, I think, is going to address them with you, Doug. Karen,
Okay.
Welcome back.
Hi. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the questions. So I'll read them out, Doug. So that
Sure.
Yeah. So I'll just go straight to the first question. It's what effect will blasting the granite have on the subsoil and existing drainage for the short term and for the long term?
Okay. There's more than one way to answer this question. There's going to be multiple answers. In some places, shattering the bedrock is going to hasten subsurface drainage, which would cause upstream groundwater levels to drop and downstream ground level elevations to rise. But in other cases, it can create entirely new subsurface drainage paths that will make that currently unknown and unknowable subsurface storage just that much harder to know. So your range of answers go from it's going to speed drainage to I have no way of knowing. And there's every answer in between those two.
Yeah, so what I understand from your presentation, you're saying there's an unknown amount of water currently stored in the bedrock, in the pockets around the bedrock, and we don't really know how much water that is. So if we start blasting and disturbing that, that's going to cause an unknown issue, I guess.
Yeah, and I would say we know how much, we know our quantity, we have no idea our location, and it's probably unknowable. Somebody asked me, how would you do this? And I was like, oh, we could do, dye tracing or radioactive tracing, and we could do ground penetrating radar, and you start and work through what all you could do to answer the question. And I came to the answer, there's no good way to do it. And blasting bedrock will make that more complicated. It's entirely possible it could make it all drain away at once. If they open up a restricted channel, it's not really passing any flow, and they open it all up, then suddenly all this water would end up in the beaver pond all at once, and you're going to create downstream flooding, because right now the water leaving the beaver pond is already right at the edge of causing flooding. You increase the amount of water in the beaver pond, you're going to increase downstream flooding. So yeah, it's it's complicated, and there is nobody that's going to have a good answer.
And ClubLink, or the city has provided 192 conditions for ClubLink. Is one of those conditions possibly identifying how much water there is hidden amongst this bedrock, or like, does ClubLink have any?
No, not quite. What we have is one of the conditions, and there's probably several conditions here, but specifically address creating a hydraulic model that accurately predicts how the system behaves. So it would have to include that subsurface storage in their model. The current model they've got doesn't include that storage. They've they don't think they need it in order to predict what they've observed, but that's not what we saw, and that wasn't our testimony. We saw that it was necessary, and now it's possible they don't need 70,000 cubic meters of storage. That's possible. Maybe they only need 40,000 cubic meters of storage. It's these are still really big numbers. Like that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so can I just jump in here before you go to the next question, Karen? So Doug, where and how is this analysis going to happen? Can you just make it clear or do we know yet in our process going forward? Is it this new table of experts that's been formed? Is that going to analyze this previously undescribed storage option or?
That team of experts probably isn't going to try to they'll quantify the storage. They probably aren't going to try to figure out the details. It's figuring out the details that's a really difficult question. It's really easy to say 40,000 cubic meters more water left the pond than was ever in it. Okay, so there's 40,000 cubic meters of storage that we can't see. All right. Answering why we can't see it is hard. There's not going to be there is no simple engineering answer to that question.
And perhaps then I'm reading into your answer that it doesn't matter as much why you can't see or know where the water is, other than everybody accepts there is a storage of some type of water present in the site in its current use that shouldn't be damaged, shouldn't be
has to
disrupted.
Be maintained. Yeah,
has to be maintained. Is that perhaps the best
that
we
is
could
true.
hope for?
That would be the best we could hope for. The problem is it's because we don't know where this storage is, there's no way to know. Let's say they go down and they fix a manhole at, I don't know, some intersection, and while they're in there, they change the clay dikes that are stopping groundwater from flowing, and now they're preventing the water from leaving. Now the storage fills once and never empties, which means it can't be used the next time. So we need it to drain in 20 days. Well, it's not going to drain in 20 days now. And there's no way for us to know that. Or the opposite, they go in there, they fix the manhole, and now it drains out in 3 days. Again, there's no way for us to know that. We can't tell. It's a mystery. And we could spend the effort and find out, but I don't know what that effort would be. There's no, this isn't done because it's too, one of the problems is if it's surrounding everybody's basement, the storage is all on private property. Well, I can't tell 600 residents that they can't dig in their backyard. They can't put a post hole down. They can't cement that hole in their basement. No, you can't do any of those things. That's not going to happen. But for the same reason, we don't know if that's what has to or not happen in the part that's already developed. It's also important from my perspective that we don't change what we can leave in existing conditions, because we don't know how that's going to change things. So if suddenly we're draining if there was 60,000 cubic meters of storage on the upstream side of the golf course, and then we blast the golf course, then we get all that 60,000 cubic meters of storage in 3 days, not in 3 weeks. And we don't know.
I hear you. Okay. Karen.
All that talk made me think of another question that someone had sent in. So I'm gonna skip down to that one. If the stormwater management plan fails, like ClubLink's plan fails, and any of the existing homes are flooded, either during the construction or sometime after the development is completed, will ClubLink, Mito, Richcraft, or perhaps the city, would they be required to pay for damages caused by the flooding?
Yes, although insurance would be involved. It would probably be insurance that pays for it. You may go through the city or Richcraft or Minto or somebody else to get to that, but it would be insurance. The highest risks in the existing development, the highest risks are downstream. People living on the existing Kissel Drain. The high-tech Canada is at risk far more than the people up on the side of the hill. Yes, there is a risk for the people on the side of the hill, but it's if their stormwater management plan doesn't work, it's not a risk for the people downstream, it's a certainty. And that's part of where that introduced liability is. The city's not going to want to approve any of this, because until they know they've got a solution for the water, they got the capacity for the water, and they don't yet. But until they know they do, they're not going to want to make any approvals.
And that's why the city has so vociferously argued the stormwater management application. I think you've got a paper dragging there, Karen. Yeah, it's difficult for sure. Another question.
Okay, so on a related topic of downstream landowners, then I think the NCC, they own a lot of the downstream land. I think they're opposed to the development. Can their opposition actually stop the development? And if it can, why would that be?
So, okay, I'm going to preface all this saying I'm an engineer, not a lawyer. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about water law, but I may be missing bits. So please take everything I'm about to say with advice from a lawyer. It's my understanding that common law drainage requires that the water goes where it's always gone. All downstream landowners have a right to receive the water they've always received, effectively unchanged in quantity and quality. So any downstream littoral landowner can sue for an injunction against upstream changes without having to prove damages by a change in flow. So you just have to prove that there is a change in flow. You don't have to prove that the damage is caused by a change in flow. The planning process does not supersede this, but it can complicate issues. The NCC has stated quite publicly that they are tired of getting all the downstream impacts caused by the upstream development, and expect that they would reject any future development that would cause more damage. Yeah, they can. They're experiencing significant amounts of erosion on their property, and they don't think that erosion, well, it's their responsibility to clean up, but they think it's caused by development upstream.
Okay, so they could oppose the development and possibly stop it. Is
What
there,
they can stop is a change in flows, and that would probably mean they could prevent the diversion of Shirley's Brook into the beaver pond. It might also mean they can prevent a change in urbanization. So it's possible they can prevent, yes, further development upstream.
okay. Are there
And,
any other,
sorry, Karen, can I just follow up on that, Doug? So, and that applies to any downstream landowner, not just
Technically,
the
yes.
NCC. Yes.
And in fact, the closer they are to the beaver pond, the easier it is to prove.
Because they would have more impact.
More relative impact.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the flows as it reaches the Ottawa River, the change of 0.2 cubic meters a second leaving the beaver pond will make no measurable difference at the downstream end. But if you've only got 0.4 cubic meters a second flowing out of the beaver pond and it changes to 0.6 cubic meters, well, that's a huge difference. That's a 50% increase. Well, that you can argue against very easily. So they think of them as the goalie, but there has to be a good defensive team as well. They can't stop all the shots.
Right. Thank you.
okay. So like the NCC, are there any other groups that could, I guess, get in the way of development by imposing any other kind of restrictions?
They would have to be littoral rights holders. So they would have to own property adjacent to the watercourse, direct contact with the watercourse. So if that's the city, then yeah, the city would have that right. If that's a private landowner, if that's a golf course, if that's whatever's all that high tech Canada, yeah, they have the potential of having those rights.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, I'll go on to the next question. And this is about the stormwater management restrictive covenant, the legal action the KGPC is about to embark on. So what aspects of ClubLink's development plan contravene the stormwater management covenant that they agreed to when they purchased the golf course?
So the restrictive covenant says the system will be that they're using will be consistent with the stormwater management plans that were in place in 1996. And that would include 50,000 cubic meters of temporary surface storage in the golf course. Now that's an important number because that's very similar to the missing volume. And we don't think that missing volume is being used on the golf course. It could be that they've designed this and it just essentially it leaks, that the water flows down into the granulars around the pipes and it never shows up on the surface. It could be a lot of different things. We don't know. But the point is they're currently not storing 50,000 cubic meters on the surface. And so for them to then say, well, we're going to match post to pre-flows, it's like, yeah, but you're not managing it to the way you're supposed to. It's not post to pre-flows to existing. It's post to pre-flows, the pre being what you said you were going to do back in 1996. And that's not what they've done. They haven't made any effort to demonstrate that. So they're trying to show that they can model what they've got really, really well, but they're not comparing it apples to apples. They're saying, well, we've got a bunch of apple cores. I can match the apple cores. It's like, yeah, but it's the apple that's in the writing. That's what's written down.
Okay. Okay, so when we look at the ponds that are on the golf course, we're moving some existing ponds elsewhere. in thinking about what the new ponds will look like, would they look like natural ponds, like the beaver pond looks today with walking paths, or is this going to be some kind of facility that's fenced off?
Yeah, they probably won't be fenced off. The municipalities very much like to use stormwater management ponds as park spaces. There are exceptions to that. Generally, if there's if the ponds would have very steep sides, so that people would have a hard time getting out, then they'll keep people away. But those are rare. We try not to build those because we don't like dead people. We try to make them have gradual slopes around the edges, and in which case they become public spaces. It won't look like the beaver pond. The beaver pond is a fairly unique site that it's surrounded by provincially significant wetland, and so you've got acres and acres and acres of red-winged blackbirds and spring peepers and otters and Blanding's turtles and all that, and you don't get those in stormwater management ponds. You do, but accidentally. It's incidental. It's not the raison d'etre. It sort of just happens.
Okay.
Karen, can I interject with a follow-up question here to
go right
Doug? So Doug, can you talk to our audience for a few minutes about I've come to understand that there are varying types of ponds that have been proposed by ClubLink's experts. So not all ponds are what we think of when you hear the four-letter word pond. We all think of water. We all think of slow-moving water, or if not stagnant water, with algae on top of it and some type of degree. But my understanding is that some of these iterations of the ponds, that as they've changed, have actually been dry ponds. So can you just give us a flavor of what a pond means in stormwater management? I think it means different things.
It does mean different things. So ponding is distinct from flooding. It's water on the ground temporarily that doesn't cause damage. So when we try to build stormwater management ponds, we try to store water on the surface. It can be subsurface. There are that would be more of a holding tank, but it does the same job. Store water and release it slowly. So we can do that with a dry pond. And a dry pond is basically just a low area that has a controlled outlet, but doesn't have depressional storage. There's no wet spot in the bottom. It dries out. The water goes away. A wet pond has a standing body of water at all times, even at the height of a drought. It's still got water in the bottom of it. And then other subsurface storage, we could have tanks and super pipes and all these various techniques. These are all really expensive ways of storing water. They're only appropriate in very dense urban areas. If you don't have the ponding, you blow up your streams. You got to have some kind of ponding in your system. One of the things you can do with ponds is the water comes in dirty as well. Dry ponds aren't very good at getting rid of that dirt. The wet pond is pretty good at getting rid of the dirt because the water has a chance to sit there between storms and settle out the suspended solids. The first flush, the first inch of rain, you can capture a big chunk of it and keep the sediment behind. The last half of the rain, like the rest of the storm after the first inch, is actually pretty clean water. And as long as that's managed for quantities so that it doesn't blow up the downstream channels, you're usually doing pretty well. There's more to it, of course, than that. But yeah, so wet ponds, dry ponds, and subsurface storage. And there are different versions of each of these have been proposed here. The current plan is 4 wet ponds and 1 subsurface storage.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so next question.
Mhm.
Not sure how familiar you are with the street names, but this is about the area of land that's behind Golding Crescent and Shaughnessy Crescent.
Okay.
The question is, it's going to be regraded at a higher height to be able to enable the stormwater to flow towards the new pond. So how much higher are the new houses there going to be towering above the existing homes?
So I don't know. You can assume the drawings that have been produced by the developer will continue to evolve as the project proceeds. Generally, municipalities.
Oops.
Oh, we lost Doug.
Doug? Oh my. Oh. I wonder if he's, Doug, if you can hear me, did you hit your stop video by chance?
There we go. I'm back.
There he is. All right.
Let's try that again.
Still standing. Still
Yeah,
standing.
yeah. So as I said, the municipalities really don't like directing water from one property onto another. If the drainage currently leaves the property towards the golf course, then it's going to continue to leave the property towards the golf course. We can, even if they change it from being a golf course to being something else, if the water's currently flowing away, it will continue to flow away. Essentially they've got a right of drainage. The rear yard, the new homeowner, whoever's behind them, can't stop that water. And usually the municipality would do that by putting in a drainage easement to make sure that nobody can stop the water. There was a fair bit of discussion about drainage easements in the OLT hearings. We can expect this topic will continue to come up. The municipality will expect either a drainage easement over somebody's private property, or would expect a corridor, a drainage corridor that's owned by the municipality. But I don't know. I can't tell you anything about architecture, so I can't tell you that the building is going to be looming, 3 stories above or 1 story below. I don't know. Can't answer that. Drainage, I can tell you.
Okay, but you're sure that no water is going to flow from a new home's property onto an existing home's property?
They don't have the right to drain, so no, they can't. I get, you could volunteer that, I guess. You could say, yeah, I'm willing to take a drainage easement across the back of my property, pay me $1 million and I'll do it. But they can't force it on you.
That would not be normal.
Good.
That would not be normal. Yes, that would not be normal.
Okay. Another question,
Okay.
Karen. We're at 8:17, so we're doing well for time.
Okay. Next question. With the grading changes that are going to have to happen to accommodate stormwater management, how realistic is ClubLink's statement when they say they'll retain trees wherever possible?
Those are wiggle words. I know the words I use if I'm going to lie in a report, and that's what they would be. I've seen it where developers have said, yeah, we'll retain all trees possible. And when you actually sit down and work it out, it worked out to 2% of the trees if they happen to be situated in exactly the right places. This isn't that bad. Where they're talking about it, it's actually fairly realistic. They can keep most of their trees. They will be terraforming a golf course. They will be using multiple meters of cut and fill. but where they said they can retain forest, they actually can retain forest. The problem, of course, isn't that the tree is, the tree roots go beyond property lines. That's part of the trouble. If they stop at the drip line, they're still damaging tree roots out beyond that. A tree's roots go out roughly the height of the tree. So if they're saying, well, we're staying 3 meters away from all these trees, it's like, yes, but you're still cutting off half the roots as you put your road through. So if they can leave large blocks of forest, they can keep those areas fairly untouched. That is entirely possible. So how realistic is it? I'm glad you raised it, because yes, in some places it's not, but I would say, particularly in those areas of big blocks of trees, yeah, it's fairly realistic that they can keep the trees as they are.
Good news. Okay, next question. Will the areas that are going to be parks in the new plan, will they remain untouched during the construction phase, or are they going to need to be dug up for regrading to accommodate the flow of stormwater?
So you can assume, well, okay, so stormwater management facilities are generally put in first. They're the first infrastructure being built. So if there is drainage that has to be directed to the stormwater management ponds, they're going to reshape those park spaces to provide that drainage. Developers tend to want to do all the work in any one spot all at once if they can get away with that. So I think it's safe to say parks are not likely to remain untouched. They would be changed probably at the beginning of, like, when they start digging, they'll be reshaping those parks.
Okay. I think we can probably give Doug a little bit of a break for a minute. We have kind of the question from a different angle. This is an interesting question. I love this. Someone's thinking outside the box. Question is, why don't you suggest that people donate their windfall of the license refunds from the Ford government? No one was expecting it. And it would be
That's good.
interesting to report how many people gave this amount from a public relations perspective, and also to show MPP Fullerton how serious the community is. So thanks for that question. That's a good idea.
I like that.
Barbara, do you want to maybe comment on that?
I suggest I'm supposed to comment because you gave Doug the question off. Yeah, we can put it in an e-news. It's a great suggestion. I certainly know. My husband mentioned it to me, read it in the news, and a month or so ago, and said something about this, and I just kind of, well, I didn't listen to him. Sorry, Mike, but then I got this check in the mail last week and my eyes popped and I said, why is Doug Ford sending me $470? And yeah, it's actually very creative thinking. So I'll put my mind to that. And thank you for the suggestion. I'm not monitoring who's sending what in, so I don't know who to thank, but whoever you were, thank you for the suggestion, and we'll pursue that. It's a great suggestion. It is a bit of a windfall and perhaps money people weren't expecting. And given, I'll go so far as to say, given that I personally think the Ontario government owes Canada something, given its decision in Oakville and Glen Abbey last year, maybe that's a place to start. So thank you for that great idea, and we'll look into that.
Excellent. So that's the end of the questions that we've received.
Wonderful.
Thanks to everyone who sent those in.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Doug, for not only a great presentation, but being open to the questions and fielding them all. I can't say enough how valuable you've been to the coalition, our board, and I know our community through all of this. And the community needs to know that, as I said earlier, Doug will be a central part of our case going forward on the restrictive covenants. And so you'll be able to hear a lot more of his wisdom and a lot more of his input as we go forward, as those legal cases start to come together. So Neil, if you could get the slides moving again, I'll wrap this up and we'll let people get on with the rest of their evening and let Doug maybe have his dinner. So one more slide here, Neil. Thank you. So this is a bit of a special slide. It's our first airing, and I saved it for tonight for folks. And this is something, some work that we've done, and to try and give people a visual of what our world is going to look like for 10 years through this development. And you can see the yellow line indicates the rough perimeter of the ClubLink lands, and we well know that this development is going to take all corners of ClubLink. And we have, with the red circle, marked blast impact zone of 1.25 kilometers. And you may ask where we got that. Well, we know that when KNL blasted north of the Beaver Pond, we know through our community where damage was registered, and we know it was fully registered 1.25 kilometers away from the impact zone. So we have systematically, with the help of Google Maps, marked that out, and you can see how large a zone this is. It is massive. And as a result of this kind of a pictorial, you can see why the Canada North Tech Park, for example, is very, very concerned. Not only are they operating businesses, there are industries in there with high-tech equipment, with small gradations, etc. But beyond that, it has basically encompassed all of Canada Lakes, all of Beaver Brook. It's going over into Katimavik across the highway and well beyond Centrum and into Heritage Hills. And that is really, really problematic for our community. Of course, this doesn't speak to the transportation problems that are going to be created during the construction phase alone with the materials coming and going. But it is this quality of life and lifestyle issue that is going to be so terribly impacted. And I can't help but think that this visual represents that adage, a picture speaks 1,000 words. There will be no one spared from this development. And so you are essentially talking about 30 or 40,000 people, plus the people who staff and develop within the tech park. So hugely problematic. And so we put it to you tonight so that I can complete the ask for the evening. Next slide, Neil. We can't continue the fight without your help. It is Earth Day tomorrow. It's Earth Day Eve, and my candle still burns. So I can only ask you to contribute what you can. But know that we will continue with all diligence to respect every dollar that you donate, that we will turn as much of it as we can to funding professional opinions like Doug Nuttall's that will make a difference in opposition to ClubLink and Minto and Richcraft. And it is you who will make a difference. So please consider a donation tonight. You can make your donations. Next slide, Neil. I believe this is the next slide. Oh, it's one of my pretty slides. Yes. Isn't that beautiful? Together, we can save our green space. Next slide. I don't have my cheat sheet up. This was the one I was looking for. You can donate at our website 24/7, ourcanadagreenspace.ca. On our homepage, there is the green Donate Now button. e-transfers, no service fees. Your entire donation fights ClubLink. No codes, automatic deposit. It's easy schmeezy. If you'd like to write a check, we're happy to pick it up, or our mailing address is there. And you can also, if you choose to donate by credit card, you can, our GoFundMe link is there and you can donate by credit card there, but your donation is reduced by service fees. And we want to make sure you're aware of that. Thank you. Next slide, Neil. And so the end of our evening tonight, we can't do this alone. We have a core group of volunteers and tens of thousands of hours have been put to this. We have good partners in our elected representatives in the city, with Councillor Kathy Curry, Marilee Fullerton at the province, and our MP Jenna Sudds. We all work together. We are all committed to this. We need your help. And we thank you on Earth Day Eve. Celebrate Earth Day tomorrow. And remember, Earth Day, our goal is not just an environment of clean air and water and scenic beauty. The objective is an environment of decency, quality, and mutual respect. So thank you, Doug, Karen, and Neil in the background, who have made tonight possible. Thank you all for tuning in. Please send us your feedback. If you have suggestions for another town hall, we'd love to have it. Be safe and take good care. Good night, Canada.